How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brown Logan, and today I bring you a statistic that I did not think was possible, considering how London and the UK in general have very tight gun laws. It's nearly a 100% ban on guns for private civilians. I don't even think most of their police carry guns. Some of their police do carry guns, but the majority of them do not. And you see the headline right over my left-hand shoulder. London murder rate overtakes New York's. Now, this is New York City. I'm pretty sure that is. We'll get into more about the specifics in the article. And this is on the BBC, so this is straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And I don't think the BBC would like to have any kind of negative news like this about the UK, comparing it to New York. But maybe they would, but I doubt it. Let's just keep going and see what the article says. And you see this picture here. It says 2 teenagers were stabbed to death in Camden on the 20th of February of this year. The knife crime is very high in UK, although you don't have too much gun crime, but we'll get into that. A spike in violent crime in London saw more murders committed in the city in February and March than there were in New York, figures show. So far in 2018, the Met Police has investigated 46 murders compared with 50 in the US city. But while New York's murder rate decreased from the end of January, London's rose markedly from that point. Ex-Met Police Chief, I'm not really sure what that stands for. Superintendent, maybe. Leroy Logan. Shout out to Logans over there. Maybe we're related. Who knows? But I'll move on. Leroy Logan says it's proof that, quote, London's violent traits have become a virus, unquote. Statistics from the New York Police Department, NYPD, and the Metropolitan Police reported in the Sunday Times and obtained by the BBC highlight narrowing murder rates between the two cities, which have similar population sizes. And then here's some articles right here. Can Scottish police help stop violent deaths in London? Met Police Chief, social media leads children to violence. Yeah, I heard about that. This article right here, we won't get into this in this one, but I've heard that they're trying to blame stuff like Snapchat and Instagram and YouTube for the spike in murder. They're trying to blame everything else other than the actual people that are doing it. And then there's another one that says 9 charts on the rise of knife crime in England and Wales. City Hall says it's, quote, deeply concerned, unquote, by knife crime in the capital, but along with the Met Police, insists London remains one of the safest in the world, cities in the world. Murders in London and New York in 2018, and you see the chart right here. Okay, the red line is London. You see how it's just going up and up and up. So it's pretty interesting, but it's like right around the same. In January, the Met investigated 8 murders, whereas the NYPD looked into 18 killings. By February, the NYPD's figures had dropped to 11, while London's rose to 15. In March, 22 murders were investigated in London, while 21 inquiries were launched in New York. The Met said it was, quote, concerned at the increase in murders in London, unquote. Now, before we go any further in the article, we got to address the elephant in the room, and that is the migration crisis that has hit much of Europe, especially Western Europe. UK is of no exception. Ethnic Brits pretty much are fleeing London. I think London at this point is only 41% ethnic Brits, people that are, you know, ethnically British. The rest of them, you coming from the Indian subcontinent, the Middle East, and other places. They're not the original people that live there. A lot of them come from third world violent countries. So maybe, just maybe, the increase in crime is due to the people that live there that come from other places. Okay, people want to blame knives, people want to blame guns. Maybe, just maybe, it's not anything to do with the particular weapon of choice. It's about the people that choose to wield the weapon. But I digress. The Met said it was concerned about the increase in murders in London. One murder is one too many, and we are working hard with our partners to understand the increase and what we can do all to prevent these tragedies from happening in the first place, the spokeswoman said. However, it is a murder rate that has left Mr. Logan feeling absolutely devastated. All right, Leroy Logan, he could be related to me. I didn't know Leroy was black. Former chief superintendent, I suppose, Leroy Logan retired from the Met Police in 2013 after 30 years of service. Quote, I cannot understand how things have gotten out of hand, he said. We have seen the virus of violence spreading. It is endemic in so many different parts of societies. It can only be dealt with in a holistic manner because it is so holistic in its impact. What does that actually mean? Holistic. What do you mean you're going to do it in a holistic manner? Police just can't arrest or stop and search their way out of this problem. It has to be done in partnership with the communities. I mean, what else you like? Come on. I've heard that trope before. We cannot arrest our way out of this. We can't stop and frisk. Look, at a certain point, you may need to do some kind of stop and frisk. You got to do something that's proactive to combat the problem. You want to do it with the communities. Well, if the communities could have a solution to the problem, then they already would have implemented it without the aid of the police. The police are there to ensure the safety of the citizens. Okay, they can't necessarily be your bodyguards, obviously. They can't stop somebody when they're about to stab you. But what they can do is take proactive measures. When they see things that don't look right on the street, they need to go investigate. Maybe do stop and frisk. Some people don't like that. They say, well, my constitution is violating my rights, this, that, and the third. However, it's been proven to be effective. And you got to ask yourself, if you lived in an area where there was so much crime and violence going on and your life is in jeopardy, would you want stop and frisk to be there, or would you not want it to be there? Rights or no rights, what would you rather have in your community to keep yourself and your children safe? And this was a video right here, right on the screen. It says, youth club leader describes an increasing level of violence among teenagers. Teenagers, that's an interesting term. The Met Police has launched 44 murder investigations in 2018, 31 of which have been as a result of stabbings. So you got 31 people in the first 3 months of 2018 that have been stabbed to death. The deaths of 47-year-old Laura Cecilia Navarrete de Figueroa from Twickenham and her sons Claudio and Joaquin, 7, are part of the same Met Police murder investigation. She was found stabbed in London, while the boys were discovered dead along with their father at the foot of Burling Gap in Sussex. Now, I'm not trying to disparage the people that died. May they rest in peace. But you see their names. Obviously, that's not an ethnic Brit. Furthermore, the person that probably killed them, or the persons that killed them, were probably of the same race or of a race that's not ethnically British. Because if it was an ethnic Brit that was alleged to crime, it'd be probably labeled as a hate crime. And if I'm wrong about that, let me know in the comments below. But I think I'm accurate on what I say. Croydon Central MP Sarah Jones, who chairs the all-party parliamentary group on knife crime, told the BBC's Today program that London could learn from New York and how to reduce violent crime. And this is a picture of her here. And it says, Sarah Jones says London needs to treat violent crime like a disease. That's interesting. I'm not really sure how you do that. Quote, New York has been able to bring down serious violence through a public health approach, she said. That's not really true. What New York did, if you're talking about bringing down a violent crime since the 90s to today, what happened was a crackdown on crime and the violence, stop and frisk, things like that, broken windows policies. That's what they did. Public health approach. What did they do as far as public health? Like, that's not really it. You got to get tough on the criminals. A lot of these criminals are not necessarily mentally ill. A lot of them just want to commit crime. And if they see that there's not going to be a lot of kickback or any kind of deterrent away from doing so, then they're more likely to do it. So you got to get tougher on the criminals, and you got to take proactive steps to prevent any kind of actions like this from taking place in the first place. We need a proper strategy that looks at all the issues. Knife crime and violent crime acts are like an epidemic. You need to go in at the source to cut it off, and then you need to inoculate the future young people against it. Okay, so we're talking about violent crime vaccines. How are we going to go and do that? How does that make any sense? You need to go in at the source to cut it off, absolutely. But what is the source? I think that is where many of us may differ. Those of you who are on the left and those of you who are like myself, more on the right, on the conservative side, I see that certain people need to be approached more, stopped and frisked. These type of things. Get tough on crime. That's where the source is, because if you're not tough on crime, and also let's look at the just, out of control influx of people from other places, people that have different languages, different cultures, different everything. They're not going to be able to come into society and ingratiate themselves properly. Matter of fact, in London at this point, what is a dominant culture? Can anybody say what it is? When there is no dominant culture, whatever is most dominant will succeed. And what I mean by that is there's not one thing that people subscribe to as a culture. However, the one culture that most people subscribe to is going to be the one that is the most dominant, if that makes any sense. And I think we're seeing the most dominant cultures in a particular place expose themselves to what they are as it relates to the violence. Going in that source means major intervention work with youth workers. Inoculating means going to schools, changing the social norms, educating kids, teaching them what it is to be a man, teaching them how they don't need to carry knives. So I guess we're going to ban knives. I guess it's going to be the next thing on the chopping block. Your Ginsu knife, your butter knife, all that kind of stuff, your steak knife to cut up your prime rib and whatnot. We're going to throw that away. And then how are you going to teach children how to be men? How are you going to teach boys how to be men? Shouldn't that be the role of their parents? What is a teacher or some other random person going to do in order to have that happen? A lot of these people are being taught how to be men, although it's the wrong way. A lot of them are being taught by gangbangers and stuff like that. How can you really combat what the gangbanger says when you come in as some random person, probably a woman, trying to teach this boy who's already 16 years old how to be a man? At that point, you're too late. That should have been something that was already done in their youth. And here's a picture right here, I guess, of a police car in UK. And it says the Met has investigated 46 murders in 2018 and 31 were stabbings. In February, the Met's Commissioner Cressida Dick visited police in Glasgow to learn about a public health approach, which has seen murder rates in Scotland drop dramatically. There are plans for Ms. Dick to carry out more quote-unquote fact-finding trips in New York and with the West Midlands, Durham, and Avon and Somerset forces. Meanwhile, the government has launched a £1.35 million campaign aimed at 10 to 12-year-olds. The adverts to run across social media and digital channels feature stories of teenagers who have been stabbed. Now, what are the stories going to say? You know, drop the knife, put the knives down, ban knives. I'm not really sure what's going to happen. At the end of the day, can I say I'm surprised? Absolutely not. I think this is a result of the migration crisis and also of extremely liberal policies. Most of these crimes are happening among young people. This just goes to show that the weapon of choice is not really the problem. It's a matter of people choosing to do things that are against social norms, that are against socially acceptable behavior. You could ban guns all you want. You could ban knives all you want. People are still going to find a way to hurt each other. Last I checked, knives were legal. Even if you cannot legally purchase a knife in the store, you can make shanks. I mean, people can stab each other in prison. So how are you really going to stop that? If you have a place where guns are more accessible in New York City, well, they still have pretty tight gun laws in New York, but that's a different story. But in the United States, guns are more accessible than in London and the UK in general. How do you explain the uptick in violence in London where you don't have the same laws as the United States? Okay. Like I said, it's not about the weapon of choice. It's about the person who is holding the weapon. A lot of these kids, you coming from third world countries, you coming from broken homes, you coming from a place where there's no accountability for their actions. They can do whatever they want. And here's the result of it. Hopefully London is able to recover from this whole situation. But like I said earlier in this video, a lot of native British people, a lot of the ethnic Brits are leaving London. At this point, I think London is 41% ethnic Brit, which is really a crying shame, considering how London is the capital of the United Kingdom on the island of Great Britain. I mean, it's just like if you had Africa and there was a country in Africa that was 100% black. Let's say Kenya is 100% black, and then they were forced to flee their own country to the point where a place like Nairobi is 41% Kenyan. That's really ridiculous, but I think I've made my point. It's not about the weapon. It's about whoever is holding the weapon with which they choose to do someone harm. So what do you think? Do you think that London's murder rate being high like this is of no surprise because of what's going on with the migration crisis? Do you think that having more relaxed gun laws in UK would alleviate some of the problems? Because they kind of want to frame it like it's teenager on teenager violence. But what about when the teenagers gang up and break up somebody's house, beating up old ladies and whatnot, robbing them? Shouldn't that woman or a man with a family of four, shouldn't they be able to protect themselves away from these criminals? And then if you are a teenager that's over 18, shouldn't you be able to protect yourself legally with a firearm so you won't be stabbed to death by a bunch of kids in London, or so-called kids in London? Whatever your comments are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.